Hey everybody, welcome to the final part of this 7-part video tutorial series on parking assignments in Taxi Tuner version 4 for Say Intentions. In this video I'm going to talk about how to handle areas like this. So maintenance areas, I'm going to talk about like overflow areas and cargo areas. Basically the peripheries of an airport. We'll start with the maintenance areas. So here we are at London Heathrow. Pretty much any major hub will have a maintenance area or base, and usually in front of those in real life you'll see parked aircraft. Now this one, so in Google at Heathrow here, they've used artificial intelligence to basically get rid of all the aircraft in the imagery, and you can see even at the passenger terminals there's no aircraft, and that's because they've used artificial intelligence to remove them from the imagery. But these maintenance areas would normally have quite a few aircraft, so what I do, I normally set them to a gate type of none. I will define them, and so for example, this one is Tango Alpha 6. So I define it as Tango Alpha 6. I put in the airline code, but I'll set the gate type to none, visual only. And that way an aircraft doesn't spawn in there. Otherwise, if you leave them as like, if you just say gate, or even if you do like gate overflow, you're going to have a lot of aircraft that spawn in there, depart from there, and arriving aircraft taxiing to the maintenance area. And what it's going to do is it's going to poach aircraft from the terminals. So you'll end up with a really busy cargo ramp, and then you'll have a very not busy, a very slow terminal ramp. And at a place like Heathrow, with all these parking spots for British Airways, there wouldn't be that many left at the terminals. So I think best practice right now is to set these to gate none, visual only. And that way you aren't going to be poaching your traffic from elsewhere. Now, maybe in the future we'll get like a static aircraft option. That'd be great. The other thing is a lot of third-party scenery developers will already have a few static aircraft over in these areas. So that's nice too. Now the reason I define them, you may ask, why even define them? Why not just delete them and just leave it blank? Well, I define them because if, let's say we do get a static aircraft option one day, I already have it defined. So all I have to do then is just click on it and change the type of gate to, whatever I want. And another reason to define it is, for whatever reason, if someone was to fly in to Heathrow here and Say Intentions, if they wanted to park over here at the maintenance area, they could say, they could request, like let's say they wanted to go to, stand Tango Alpha 6. They could ask Say Intentions after landing. They're like, British or Speedbird 321 request taxi to stand at Tango Alpha 6. And since it is defined in here, Say Intentions will give them instructions to that stand. Whereas if you did not have it defined, basically Say Intentions would not be able to provide taxi instructions to it. So I always define them, and then I set them to gate none. Now what you may want to do in the next type of parking is our overflow pads, our overflow ramps. These ones are very popular at Heathrow, and they're very popular throughout London or throughout Europe. You can see the main terminal here I have is set as a type gate. And with that, that's where the aircraft will primarily park. That's where they'll park first. Now, these other ones I have set as basically overflow. It's like this light purple. I will set it as a gate overflow. And then I basically put all of the airlines that use the Queens terminal, which is Terminal 2 here. I assigned all of those airlines to that spot. So now any of these airlines, they can use this as an overflow parking spot if for whatever reason they are unable to park at the gate. Now you may ask why I left most of these as gate nuns. And the reason I do that is because right now gate overflow parking, basically aircraft, even though it's labeled overflow, aircraft will park there randomly just to sort of fill it in. And I don't necessarily want that because I want the aircraft here to be primarily parked at the terminal rather than the overflow pads. So I left most of these as gate none, and then I left one here as an overflow parking, and then I added some over here as an overflow parking as well. So I've got 3 overflow spots, which I've found to be plenty at Heathrow here, at least for Terminal 2. I've found that to be more than enough. Basically, it's up to you. You can make them all overflow. Just be aware that you're going to have a lot of aircraft actually parking at them. It's not only overflow. It's like 50% of the flights will use a gate here if available, and the other 50%, even if there's gates available here, will park at the overflow. So I didn't want that. And that's why I left most of mine as gate none. But you can do it however you want. You may have to, load the sim a few times and just observe what it looks like in sane tensions. And if it looks like too much traffic is parking here and not enough at the terminal, well, then you might want to think about turning a few more of these to gate type none. Oops, rather than okay, gate overflow. Now these ones are not overflow, and this is where Logan Air parks. They don't park anywhere else. So this is their normal gate. So I left these as a normal gate small, and I have them set to Logan Air because that is where they park in real life. So that's the overflow type parking. Now down here is the cargo area. Now cargo areas are special. I assign them, so like here at Heathrow, you'll want them as a type cargo. I set them as extra large because they get, they might get a 747, Cathay Pacific 747 or something similar. So I set them as extra large. These ones I didn't assign, or like these two I didn't assign any airlines for because I didn't see when I was looking at all of the airlines that use Heathrow, I didn't see any that were using those in the data. So I left them blank. But if someone were to fly in some obscure cargo airline that was not in the data and they requested cargo to the ramp or cargo to parking, they would be directed to one of these that's unassigned. So that's why I do that. I usually have one cargo spot that's unassigned. Because there's a lot of obscure cargo airlines in the world and a lot of charter ACMI cargo airlines too. So they may not be regular visitors, but you may end up getting one someday at the airport. And in that case, you're going to want somewhere for them to go. So I usually leave a cargo spot or two unassigned. Now this one, I've assigned a Cathay Pacific in Singapore, so those unassigned ones are not going to park there. Only Cathay and Singapore will end up parking here. Now, to find these, cargo airlines are a little bit more involved than passenger because they don't show up in FlightAware. FlightAware is not going to show you what gate or what parking spot DHL parks at or Singapore Cargo parks at. So what you're going to want to do for that is exactly what we did for the passenger airlines. You're going to want to go to Flight Radar 24. You're going to want to go to, let's do like Singapore Cargo. So we'll go Singapore Airlines. Hopefully they have a flight into Heathrow during our time. So we'll go up to Heathrow. They go to Gatwick too. So Heathrow, departures. Okay, yeah, they have 2 cargo flights and they're actually to Amsterdam. So we'll click on this one, Singapore 739. 747-400. Oops. Okay, here, London. Click that one. We'll zoom in. And you'll just have to go through each of them. So you'll see this one. They parked here at 607. So actually let me go back to my, let me go back to my profile here. Okay, I already have that sign. So this was 607. So 607, I have set to Singapore. And when I did this, I went through and I went through a lot of their flights and they pretty much always used 607. Same with Cathay Pacific. So that's why those 2 are assigned there. But basically for cargo spots, in order to find them accurately, you need to go through Flight Radar 24 because that's really the only way to know is zoom in on the map and figure out where they're parking. Now, I will say at a place like O'Hare, for example, let's just go to the map quick at O'Hare. You can quickly see that this entire ramp is all FedEx. So in that case, it's safe to assume you can just assign all of these spots to FedEx because they pretty much own this entire ramp. And then the rest of these terminals, if you're not sure, check Flight Radar 24. But that's what I do for the cargo ramps. A little bit more involved because you cannot use FlightAware. The only way, you have to go to Flight Radar 24 and you have to zoom in and figure out where each of them park. That's really the only way. And outside of that, that is it for this video. Actually, you know what? We're going to talk about a few more suggestions. And big one for me is at pretty much any civilian airport, anything that has an FBO, I usually assign one spot, at least if it's in the US or Europe, I make sure to assign one spot at the FBO to NetJets, Echo Juliet Alpha. And then I say as general aviation medium. And I do that because I don't want, if someone flies NetJets is extremely popular in the US and Europe. If someone's flying NetJets in say intentions and they land at Milwaukee here, they request taxi to parking. Well, I don't want them to be sent to like the corporate hangar, which is also a GA medium. I want them to end up at the FBO. So I make sure to set this spot GA medium, but then I assign it to NetJets. And that way if someone flies in here in NetJets, they'll be directed to the FBO when they land. And you can do that for NetJets is the big one. You might want to think about doing it for FlexJet too in the US, so Lima X-Ray Juliet. It's up to you, but almost always I recommend adding at least one spot for NetJets. If it's an airport that you think might get it. If it's the Podunk airport in the middle of nowhere, don't bother. But something like this where you think they may get private jet traffic, definitely add it. And Also, while we're at Milwaukee, I'll mention historical airlines. Milwaukee used to be it used to be the major hub for Midwest Express or Midwest Airlines back in the day. They are defunct. They are no longer an airline. However, I love them. Other people may have loved them. If you have the Leonardo Mad Dog MD-80, you might want to fly the Midwest Express MD-80 into Milwaukee. Well, if you do so, you're going to want somewhere to park. So I assigned a spot for Midwest Express at this gate. This gate's not used by anything in real life currently. It's an empty gate, but it was used by Midwest Express in the day. So try and add a historical airline or two, if you think it's necessary. So at Milwaukee here, I know this used to be a hub for Midwest Express, so I'm gonna want a few Midwest Express gates assigned here for anyone that flies into there with it. It also used to be a hub for Northwest, so you may want to consider adding a gate or two for Northwest Airlines. Same thing with like if you were doing Detroit or Minneapolis. Before Delta merged with Northwest, those two airports were major Northwest hubs. So you may want to consider at all of the Delta gates at Minneapolis or Detroit adding in their Northwest, and then at all of like the Endeavor gates, which is Delta Regional or Delta Connection, I think, whatever. You might also want to consider adding in Mesaba, which was Northwest regional partner. So just something to think about. It's not necessarily required, but it is nice for any of us that use retro or historical flights or aircraft every now and then. Besides that, I'm going to talk about one more thing, and for this, I'm going to go to O'Hare. This is something that confuses a lot of people, and it's going to be the ramp GA medium gates for commuter airlines. So at O'Hare here, for example, we have these three gates: Fox 4 Alpha, Fox 4 Bravo, and Fox 4 Charlie. Southern Airways Express parks here in real life, and they use Cessna Grand Caravans, the Cessna 208. Well, those really, really small commuter aircraft and sand tensions are programmed to use a ramp GA, General Aviation Medium spot. They're not going to use a gate small. So do not assign those as gate small. If you know that it gets one of those commuter airlines, assign them a ramp GA medium. And then assign the airline to them. You definitely want to assign the airline to those. Like for here, FDY, Southern Airways Express. Because if you don't, if you just leave them as General Aviation Medium, you're going to end up with like a business jet parked there, which you don't want. They don't park at the terminal. But like I said, for those caravans, like us over here, you got like Cape Air, so like a Cessna, twin engine Cessna, GA medium, and then you'll assign the code Cape Air or whatever airline you're using. Now, just a note with the GA mediums and commuters, there's a lot that do that. So the big ones are the Cessna Caravan. So those are a GA medium. The Dash 8 Q100 and Q200s are a ramp GA medium, whereas the Q300s and the Q400s are a gate small. So the cutoff in the Dash 8s is between the 200 and the 300. 300, 400s are gate small, and the 100, 200s are a ramp general aviation medium. A little bit confusing, but that's just how it is. There are reasons for that. The reasons are too long to mention here. But just know that that is the delineation in the Dash 8s. I'm trying to think if there's any other that are. So Beach 1900 would also be a ramp GA medium. And like a Fairchild Metroliner would be a ramp GA medium as well. And the other thing is for a lot of those, like Beach 1900, for example, or even the Cessna 208, a lot of cargo airlines operate those. So you may be tempted, like for Fed, if you're assigning it to like Mountain Air Cargo, which is FedEx feeder. They fly the Cessna Grand Caravan 208s for FedEx. Mountain Air Cargo. You may be tempted to put those as a cargo type of spot, but again, those need ramp general aviation medium, even though they're operated by FedEx. They need ramp GA medium. So just keep that in mind. If you're using any of those commuter, if you ever have any questions on any of those, like which one is assigned to which gate, let me know. I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but I do know most, and I will be able to help you with that if something's not showing up where you expect it. But as a general rule, if it's a small commuter airliner, it gets ramp GA medium. If it's like a regional jet or a Dash 8 300 or 400, it gets a gate small. If it's like an Airbus A320 or 737 or 757, gets a gate medium. If it's a 767 up through like a 777 or an A350, it gets a gate large. And if it's a 747-8 or an A380, it gets a gate extra large. So just keep those in mind. But that concludes the video. That actually concludes this series. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, I'm very active on the Say Intentions Discord. My name on there is Rob Shu. You can either send me a direct message or you can tag me or respond to me. I usually respond. I'm very active in the Taxi Tuner section of it. But you can find me throughout on there. Just ask me a question or ask any of the other wonderful taxi tuner experts, like such as Scott, Rust Master, or Pilot Guy. I think it's like Pilot Guy 9853. You'll see them if you go to the Taxi Tuner profiles. Ask any of us questions. We're more than happy to help. But anyway, I hope this has been helpful for you, and I hope it's just shown you a little bit of how important parking codes are to Say Intentions. They're very important. So thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed.